Oh, that was the.
Oh, leave those open, it's cold.
Now, we've been in here all afternoon.
You're
All right, Steve, we'll go ahead and get started with those who are here.
Did you get messages from everybody?
Oh, I got an email, I got a text from Andy that he's going to be late.
Oh, wow.
He's on his way.
Okay.
Joe's almost always tight on 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
we will go ahead and call this committee of the whole meeting to order. I did get a text, Andy Clark is on his way. I know Mr. Stanker has some difficulty getting down from Westchester. My understanding is that everybody will be here, so. We are called this committee of the whole meeting so that we could go over the updated discussion draft of the financial recovery plan. James, do you want to take the lead on this, or do you want me to turn it over to April and Anna Mary?
I think we can turn it over to them.
So for those of you who don't know, April Davis and Anna Mary Thomas are the two ladies who are assigned to us to help us in our financial recovery. They are at all of the Financial Planning and Supervision Commission meetings, and they work diligently behind the scenes to put all these numbers together. So thank you both for staying here. I know that you have a long way to drive home, so we appreciate that. So we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to talk about a couple of changes that happened since the last time you've seen this. One of them, Mr. Thompson actually emailed me and told me about a formula problem, which I appreciate. And it was only on the last page of the general fund that you had. What happened was, and he probably knows more because I changed the format of it at the bottom. All the ending balances on the page before that were correct. On the last page, it's a little tricky because when you do a recovery plan item, you have 1 year of stuff and it really rolls into every year. And I wanted to show you the true aspect of what would happen that year of things. So in that, the calculations weren't quite right with how to calculate that all the way down. I've changed that now where you see the change in fund balance above before the fund balance with everything before the recovery items. And then what the change is from the recovery items to get to the correct ending balance on there.
Oh, got it.
Thank you.
So that was the only one that was wrong. Again, that's my mistake, and I appreciate you finding that. It did change the numbers overall. The other change that is in here from last time, because it wasn't, my formula wasn't that far off that this shows. In the Superintendent of Public Works, I was asked to take out seasonal workers, and so we did that for all 5 years. So that was you take it out of one and times it by 5 basically, because they didn't have insurances or things like that. And there were 2 seasonal employees projected in there. So that decreased the expenditures for that department, which then goes down into the totals. That's why the totals on the page right before the last one, which I think is page 5, changed from the last version you had.
Do you know what the cost of those 2 seasonal employees were?
With PERS, Medicare, and stuff, it was around $69,000.
Each year?
Yes. Estimated. Go ahead.
James, I thought when we talked to Mr. Gears and the mayor and everything, they wanted those in?
They did want them in. When we originally looked at the fiscal recovery plan, and it was my original understanding, it was my mistake there, is that even before we got to the fiscal recovery plan items, that we had to show a positive, like I guess it would be our page 5 maybe, but we had to show a positive at the fund balance by the end of the year for at least for 2022, but maybe for 2021. And we were originally showing deficits, and we still are without any of the changes that we're going to make. So it was one way to reduce, and that reduced it, $400,000 or $350,000. It was one way to help to reduce. If we decide that, hey, we want to have those in there, and we think that those are going to be helpful, it won't put us negative if we execute all of the items in the recovery plan items on that next page, but it'll put us really close to break even. So it's just a decision whether we want to keep it or not.
I just want to point that out to everybody.
Yeah, but definitely the Service Safety Director has indicated that it would be helpful for city services to have it in there.
So there are 2 workers who work 16 weeks to do mostly park stuff and summer things.
The other thing that I wanted to clear up in the income tax, and I had given James Bonsall some notes on for the presentation that happened last week to, I guess, council the whole or council and then finance. In the income tax area for 2018 or 2017, what happened, and I may have misspoke too, and it's not written very good, and very well. And so it was brought to my attention. There were bonuses paid at one of the companies in December of 16, and that was paid into 17. And so that's why the decrease in 18, because they're not expecting the bonuses this year. So that's again on me. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, so I gave you
It's good to know.
not clear on that one. So I wanted to clear that one up. Right now, this is still in discussion draft. I think that April and I both appreciate you guys taking the time, looking at it in detail. It's still in a discussion draft, but you're having many meetings and talking about various different viable options. And we have multiple recovery plan items, whether you do them or not. This has to be what you intend to do, and then what we've done is help you project what those intentions could or could not do to this forecast going forward. Again, it's forecasting, it's what we know right now, it's the intent right now, so, you know, things can change, but it's been a great step in the right direction, so I'm glad to see that. I think it is April is as well. So we've had more time to kind of dive into things as a city and as us as well, and I think we're learning more as we go.
And on the, I want to make sure, I want to note that under the recovery plan items, we have not listed the retirees' health care insurance because that has not been done or finalized or whatever, but that is potentially, that is something that we intend to look at as part of the financial recovery plan, so there's another potential for savings in that area.
The other thing I wanted to point out too, this does not have base increases. I don't know if that was talked about at your work session, but there's step increases, there's longevity increases based on personnel and that increasing every year, but there's no base increases. So if there's base increases, that drastically changes this recovery plan as well. I wanted to make sure that was out there. And I don't know if you talked about this, but capital projects as well, vehicles included. Those are not a part of this or the 2 other funds that are presented tonight as well as discussion draft. Is there any other questions on the general fund, other things that you would like to be looked at? Those are things that, you know, I guess we're here to kind of answer or do.
Questions, feel free. This is committee of the whole. We'll just,
I'm pretty sure James kind of went over, Mr. Bonzo went over most of this the other day, so I didn't know what else.
Should we go over
questions
the 3 and 2 funds, the last 2 pages, just to clarify what's on that, and so we see how that relates to what's come before?
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the movement of the street employees? Okay. And then the movement of the lighting too?
Well, and just like the overall, we did, so the first time that we went through this, we didn't have 2, and we were rushing, of course, to get the general fund ready. So, but 2 and 3 wasn't ready yet. So having, maybe just kind of doing a quick overview of how these funds are looking.
So you want to do Fund 2 and 3, you want to do that last page?
Fund 2 and 3.
Fund 2 and 3,
Yeah.
we can do that. All right, so we'll look at street fund. I'll put it up on the big screen too. No, let me use that one. I really like your monitor. I use this. We used this when we were going through the forecasting with several departments. So this came in handy because then I could show the big picture. So,
thank Mr. Brown for that.
yes. Okay, so this was the street fund that you have in front of you as a discussion draft. The numbers for 2017 were updated just like the general fund, and then the 5 years are forecasted. The amounts in the intergovernmental revenues was left pretty much the same that was in last time. There was a large increase in 17. That this fund is really based on state budgets. We've seen cuts in that before. It's nice that we have an increase. So this one, kind of goes with the state budget, which is July through June. A conservative measure was to leave it at the same amounts, more based on what 15-16 was. We can definitely talk about if you'd rather move that increase up for revenues. That we can talk about that. Then we get into the expenditures. So in the expenditures, there's personnel that's paid out of here. There's about 4 employees currently, and I believe in 2017 as well. This includes their benefits, including pension, Medicare, health insurance. If we kept them the same in there, you would see an increase due to longevity and health insurance, basically. Okay? If you look at the bottom, I'll just go in tandem, which is the recovery plan items. You'll see movement of street employees and a correction of an employee. And then also I put in here the current employee health insurance of 15%. So I've kind of showed that separately for a reason for the general fund, which we'll get to. So I wanted to show the 15% insurance increase for each year because the recovery plan item is asking that employees pay the 15% that's projected, basically, in the insurance costs for 19 through 22. So that is separated. The amount for the employees is their pay that doesn't include that increase. So it includes a health insurance, but not the 15% increase in health insurance. Does that make sense?
The movement of street employees and correction of employee does not include the health insurance.
The 15% increase.
It doesn't include the increase, okay.
Yes. And this is important for the general fund. Okay. So what we were asked to do was to move 2 employees out of street and water fund into the general fund, basically, for the next several years until the actual street employees are paid out of the general fund. So in talks with people here, we kind of moved 1 street, 1 water almost every year is how that is showing. There is a water employee in the street fund that needs moved out as well into the water fund. And so you won't be able to match up all the expenditures from this fund into the general fund because we're talking street and water in the general fund. I don't have them separated.
Where the ones you're moving from street, you're moving them to water?
General.
Where in the general fund do they show up?
They show down in the recovery plan items. They don't show up in a department as of right now. So on the last page of the general fund, that is the first time you'll see them. On page 7, 6,
I think
6. So they're under the movement of street employees.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, if you're moving them from street maintenance repair, then it's an increase to the general fund.
Expenditures.
Okay. But as far as moving them in, but there's no specific department they're moving into.
Not right now,
Okay.
no. No, we didn't put those up into a department because it's a recovery plan item that was discussed. Until that goes into effect, we'll put it down below.
Yeah, because I didn't really see any
Right.
reflection of any departments
Right.
with it. Okay.
Correct. That's a good thing to point out too. Okay.
So is the water fund reflected on these movements here as well?
Not in the
Yeah.
street fund,
Okay,
other than the 1 employee that is a water fund employee.
Okay.
And that was all, I went over all those employees with Joe Gears, since he's the head of really those, to make sure that we get the people in the correct funds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out when and where movement is occurring in these numbers.
Okay.
And so like in 2018, we're at, there's an 88. I'm assuming that's doubling. Is that, I guess, 1 person? And then
That's 1 person.
Okay, and then 2019, we're doubling that to 2.
Yeah,
Can-
but I actually have it with specific people, so I have what they would be making.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like
Not quite a
it's not
double.
quite a double.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a little more than double.
But it's 1
depending on-
person the first year, then another person the
Yes.
second year, then
Another person
another
and
the
a water
third,
person.
and then another.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's one person per year,
Yes.
per calendar year,
and there's only
through
4.
4 years.
Correct.
Okay,
So maybe you could use
and then
a
it's, and that gives you your cumulative savings
Correct.
over the time, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
When do we, in the plan that's currently here today, when do we get the employee that's a water fund employee out of the street fund?
I believe in the 4th year, they're really close, so we can say, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, we can change that. And we can take them out earlier. This was, we said 2 a year. We can change that if you want.
Yeah, I think getting, at least getting that water fund employee out of the street, of course, there's a few general fund, or there's some people that were eventually going to move to the general fund, but yeah, getting that water fund employee out of the street fund, I think will be a better long-term benefit to have that happen earlier. Because the money that's in the street, and I don't know how that's going to then affect the other moves that you're making on the water fund. We'll have to look at that. But, of course, anytime we can free up money out of the street fund, I mean, that kind of money can be multiplied with grants. So we're really looking, I'll let you look at it and see what we can do there.
Okay.
If that's possible.
I made a note. Okay, so there was that. Any other questions on the personal services portion of this?
So right now, let me just,
Yeah.
in 2018, you're moving one employee out that
Mhm.
is not a water employee.
Correct.
We know, well, he'll go somewhere. The next year, you're moving out 2.
It's the one from 18.
The
and
one
then
plus
in
one more.
19. Yeah,
And then 1 plus 2 more.
right.
And then in 2021, it's 1 plus 3 more, and that person is the water fund
I
person.
believe so. I'll have to
Okay.
check.
Just wanted to make sure I was understanding. Thank you.
Yes, because they're all billed at the top at 4. So I have to take them out down at the bottom one at a time like we discussed. If that's not what you want to do, we can redo this. But it will definitely affect the general fund.
And these are not done now. These are potential things that we could do
Correct.
that will impact the final numbers. So they're not in the first part of this.
Correct. Okay. The contractual services and the materials and supplies, that has a lot to do with there's salt, there's all kinds of stuff for the roads. Those were left in there. Those are all, viable expenditures for this fund. The fixed expenses is traffic lights and street lighting.
Lighting.
This one, we're showing up in the top based on what we're seeing for 17 and 18 to date. And then you'll see the movement of lighting to Fund 01 General down in the recovery plan items for the same amount. So that's the whole cost going out of this fund into the general fund. And that one is one that we stated needed to come out of these 2 funds. The next one we're going to talk about.
Just because it shouldn't have been in there to begin with.
That's our opinion. Now,
Okay.
if you can get a legal opinion that says that those vehicle registration, gas tax monies that are receipted into those funds
Paper.
can be used for street lighting, then we can start, but you need to have an opinion to back it up. It's always been our understanding that that violates Ohio Constitution.
And who would we have to secure that from?
Yeah, I would go through your legal counsel and may even have to get an attorney general opinion or
That's what I was gonna
research to see
say.
if there are some attorney general opinions
Opinions.
out there. There may be something, I haven't had the time to investigate it and look, but there may be something as far as like the lateral, that you could maybe do something with that. But as far as just paying your street lights, typically, we see that out of the general fund.
Or Montgomery Road is a state highway?
I think that it's probably in the best long-term interest of the city, though, to get those out anyways, just because that's, when you have a fund that's called Street Construction and Repair Fund, and we're paying, lighting, which I consider more of a public safety kind of an expenditure, it's taking away from money that we could be using on our streets. So
Yeah.
it's the sooner we get that out there, the better, in my opinion.
Now, will this fund be actually submitted as part of our financial report?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was one of the ones that was in the negative or red, as we call it, in the fiscal emergency declaration that was done, in the analysis that was done. This was one of those funds that was in there. And I believe more so, because there's no negative showing, it was more so because of purchase ordering and encumbering that caused that as well. But I'd have to pull that back up, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I know it is the case for State Highway.
Right, okay, but what we're looking at right now, and assuming that we can do the recovery plan items, we have a budget or a cash on hand of 2.5 million at the end of the next 4 years.
Correct, if you do
Which
your
seems
plan
like a
items.
decent street fund
Yes.
to start off with.
Anything would be better.
It gets us a lot more, especially because we can multiply those funds. Like, some
Right.
areas we can get, 4 times the money for matching grants for maybe some lower income areas, and then some areas we can get half funds where we only do half matches. And
I just think it's very important that as a council, we hear all the times about the quality of our streets. I mean, it's just the number one thing. And so that we can tangibly show that the things that we're doing are actually making a positive difference in what we will be able to do in the future, I think is incredibly important. So I'm glad we got this.
Well said.
Any other questions on the street fund?
Well, the question would be, so when we have these extra, we're able to move some of these employees and get this positive $2.5 million by the end of the year 2022. Should we leave that in the street fund, or should we create some kind of a street reserve fund to house that fund?
I'm going to put.
Okay. Well, here's what I would probably say. If you're looking to build this balance up based on what you have shown right now, the one thing that you haven't shown in here are capital improvements. So are you just looking to build this balance up and have 2.5, or are you looking to do some projects as you go along? So that's what I would say. I don't know that it's necessary to establish a reserve fund, but that is completely up to council, what your intent is. I think, though, that you could build into this recovery plan capital improvements out of your street fund.
Yeah, I think that needs to be done. What do you see the benefit of having a reserve fund?
Well, only in the sense of just ensuring that the money's put away. Like, I think that we can also accomplish this through our appropriations and ensuring that we're not, just in the future, that especially for personnel services, I mean, we eventually want to be appropriating very little out of that. I think right now the public works superintendent's paid a portion out of the street.
That's the water.
The water fund, okay. So it's just basically ensuring that we appropriate for contractual services that are actually redoing streets and not, eventually I'd like to even get the salt out of there. I mean, I'd like this fund to be, any money we get for street construction repair to be truly for street construction and repair and frankly repaving or sealing, not just filling a pothole.
Right.
So.
And will the state, will they want to see those projected things you were just talking about?
I think in looking at this, that is probably a good idea. I don't know what your plan is as far as the streets, if there are some things in the works. But, sitting here just looking at it and, okay, we're going to save this money, but yet you're not showing, that you're going to do any cap. So are you going to sit on these dollars and not make any improvements and pay for them out of the street fund until you have this,
Right.
estimated 2.5? Or are there some things that you can do as you go along?
They'd have to be used as you go along, just
Yeah.
for general maintenance and upkeep of what
Exactly.
we have now. I mean, even just, nothing else, even the Durapatcher machine
Right.
that we have, just general maintenance would need to be utilized, some of that, so.
And I think that probably needs built in, because now I think really what the focus has been is how can we free up those dollars to do some of that stuff. And in the past, I think probably some of that has maybe been paid, state highway, street, general fund, where grants.
Wherever there's money, yeah.
Yeah. So I would recommend probably building some of that in.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
We have used some of that in the past for, like, the Montgomery Road, the resurfacing out here, and over on some matching for some of the other
Right.
ones. We did take it out of, M&R on that, so.
Excellent. So I think this could be an opportunity too for the street committee to possibly do some research to figure out the best ways that we might be able to utilize these, street fund expenditures. I know that there are some grants that the safety service director doesn't apply for because we don't ever have matching funds for them. And we've given up some, our President Lake can probably, tell you later, but there's been things that we've given up because we didn't have matching grants. So as long as we just make sure, I think if you're interested in that, that might be a
absolutely.
good opportunity to really look on that.
I do have a couple questions. When it comes to thinking about improvements along the way or having dollars available for matching funds, are there guidelines we need to follow in terms of keeping this balance positive? I mean, could we spend it down to zero to do improvements, or do we need to keep it at a certain level?
Okay, so you're gonna have street expenditures no matter what. You're gonna have things that come up. There's pothole repair in these funds. There's, the salt for the roads, which normally we say come out of the street fund. It doesn't, it's an allowable expense. Things like that, you will see there's expenditures in there for things like that. With forecasting, I say this is a living, breathing document. So let's say you have a huge water main break on one of your roads. That's not only going to be a water repair, that's going to be your street repair. And that's going to be costly to the city. So those things creep up as well. One of the things that we say is you need a capital improvement plan, which I've said several times. It's really good for streets to have. Then you can figure out which ones are in dire need, or you can prioritize and say, this street is number 1, this street is number 2, based on needing something done, based on their conditions. And a lot of times you have your road or engineer come out and look at those. I would not suggest to go to 0, because you're always going to have some sort of thing or expense that is related to these types of, roads, streets, whatever. I don't think we would ever tell you to go to 0, though, because you get monthly monies in, but as you can see, the revenues aren't that high. You do have a balance in there, but they're okay. But we're not really projecting them to go increasing, so that all depends on the state budget as well. I would suggest doing a capital improvement plan where you really get into what's the conditions of your roads and which ones need done, and what's the estimates, and what potential other grant funds, matching funds can you get from other sources, whether it's the state, federal, or even the county, is what I would look at. But I really wouldn't go to 0. Does that answer your question?
It helps me know we shouldn't go to 0.
I would really look to do a plan with this. And we can build in expenditures, but I think a capital improvement plan would really do the city a lot of good in mind. And really, those go out 10 years, not even 5. A lot of them go 10.
Could we see, based on the movement of the positions, I don't know what the plan creation would cost, but could we see what year could we afford to do that, so that we could have a plan potentially to look at when thinking about what other capital costs we want to build into the recovery plan?
What do you mean by that? I guess I'm lost now.
You're suggesting that we have a capital improvement plan and we can build a cost into this recovery plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking, can you help us know how much does it cost, and then what year could we afford to have the plan done, so we can have a better understanding of what is the cost that we would be putting into the plan if we're doing improvements along the way?
A lot of the times, it's usually not an outside company that will do that for you. It's a lot of times internally, and it's several different bodies that create that. We can definitely look for examples of those out at other entities that you can kind of give a sense.
That would help. I would think we'd start off with it in the streets committee probably.
The capital improvements,
It's not limited to streets.
yeah.
Right, it's not limited to streets, but the committee's infrastructure too, so.
Redoing some buildings or putting in new baths, or,
Absolutely.
that, quite honestly, we got a lot
Yeah, to go.
of that really, capital projects.
Pent-up demands,
We
yeah.
got quite a few that
Do
could.
you know if in the past, if like Public Works has done any kind of like road evaluation or grading, that like this street is in A
We-
condition and we don't got to do
there-
it, but this street has to be taken down to dirt?
There are, there have been people that have come in and actually have done an inventory on all our streets. And I do not think that inventory would have changed much between the time that was looked at and now,
I mean, that
because
would
we
be
really haven't been able to do.
Other than
Right, so that
God
would
works.
probably be a
So,
great starting point to at
Yeah, I
least
mean,
on
you know,
the
so, I
streets.
mean, there's an inventory.
Yeah, there's been a study done.
You know, but, you know, when the things, you know, as far as capital improvement projects and such, I mean, if one street, in some of the streets we have around there, one street would eat up every bit of that $560,000.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just one street. If, you know, if it milled it all the way down and, that, you know, so it and the length of the streets, you know, some of them are very long. So I mean, so you have to kind of, and what we did when we did have a little bit, we kind of looked at, okay, if we did part of this street and part of that street, you know, the worst parts of a number of them to get, you know, spread that out more than say, okay, we're going to do all of one street
Right,
and
I
use
think-
up the whole thing, but
Yeah, I think
you're
that's
right. I
the
mean,
way to do it.
there'd be a starting point of where to, you know, what else besides streets, you know, would be, you know, something in a capital improvement plan or.
Right, streets would be a line item.
Yeah.
You know, in the
yeah,
capital improvement.
yeah, that'd be very
At
true.
least it's
But-
one.
And then, but it'd be something that we're to, you know, to look for guidance as far as where do we want to get to, how do we want to get to these points, you know?
Right.
Streets is important, but then buildings are important, or, you know, whatever, traffic lights are important, or whatever the capital improvements may be, you know, the new computer system may be, you know, so it just, you're right, it'd be a line item and then prioritizing what, how much you want to spend for each of these improvements.
Right. And then, in all honesty, I mean, capital improvements, that we wouldn't be using funds from the street plan to fund, or from the street construction repair fund to fund building capital improvements, because it's probably the wrong.
Or vehicles or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Huh?
Or vehicles or anything
Right, or
like
anything,
that,
so
yeah.
it's very specific. I'm just thinking specifically to this.
Yeah.
just- But, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, yeah, just having some kind of overall plan is just to start getting our heads in the right place. We'll take it on with the infrastructure, streets and parks committee and start working that.
So, before we go to Fund 3, I'd like to go back to, well, I guess we could do Fund 3 because it's not very big, so, but I do have a few questions about the recovery plan items too.
On the street fund or the general fund?
On the general fund recovery plan items.
Okay,
once we get done with
yeah,
street
we'll
fund.
come back to that then. Okay, so Fund 3. Okay, that's up here as well. Okay, this one for the revenues is very similar to what the street construction repair fund was like. There was an increase in 17. The forecasted revenues are more in line with 15 and 16. We can talk about changing that if you would like. We have to be reasonable, like I had talked about before. In here, there is no employee costs built in the state highway. There is materials and supplies, and then the fixed expenses. And the fixed expenses, again, are the street lighting and traffic light expenses. Those, you'll see down at the bottom for the recovery plan item, those are coming out of that and being moved to the general fund, but they're both at the top until this is put into place. So that's one of the recovery plan items for this fund. You also notice that materials and supplies was much larger in 15 and 16, and one of your recovery plan items in the last recovery plan was to move some of that to the permissive MVL fund, because you have 3 street funds. So that was done in 17, and it had projected that you would do that in every year. So the actual expenditures show what you have put into place, and that's why they're at the levels they are from 17 through 22, actually. Just so that you're aware if you compared both the recovery plans at this time. Again, you'll see the balances. This was a fund that had an encumbrance that was making this go negative when we were in and did our analysis for the emergency.
Do you recall what we were encumbering?
No,
Okay.
I'll be honest, I don't remember. It's been like,
That's okay.
Long
I
time.
just was curious if it were a
Just,
particular thing.
Just general question. What kind of things is this fund? What kind of things is
It's
it
the-
generally used to pay for?
this has to be paid, these expenses should be for your state highway expenses. So it'd
Okay,
still
so
be
those
salt,
particular
yes.
roads, okay. Great, thanks.
I think similar to Eric's question, you said we adjusted down the expenses in 17 because we moved something to the permissive. What was that?
It was just similar type expenditures. It was just noted that you would move, and you did, and I forget how much it was. We projected you to move about as much as you did. I think it's $20-some thousand. I forget. It's just similar expensive, but the permissive MVL fund can take on those expenses because it was a street fund as well. So it wasn't like moving those funds over or expenses over to a fund that wasn't allowed to spend for them. What they were, salt I think was one of them, and I don't remember what else was on there.
Why do we have 3 street funds? I know, clearly the state highway one.
You are required to have all 3 of those based on the revenue streams that you have. The gas tax monies are split between state highway and street construction and repair. The permissive MVL fund is because you receive permissive license monies.
Additional fee that's added
Yeah.
on to license plate registrations, basically.
And that's restricted for road use.
That's the third one? Okay, thank you.
Any of these funds that are not the general fund, it's usually a restriction based upon the revenue source. And then you have to look at either the Ohio Constitution or other, like grant agreements and stuff to know what those are. Okay. Any other questions on that one? This is a smaller fund. This gets a very small percentage of those monies. That's why it's smaller.
I do have a general question about fund and language. So before James had asked, about creating a reserve versus having the fund, and I think your intent was to say, how do we make sure the intent of the fund is used and maintained? So I'm curious because I don't know. Is there a way to, in our recovery process, is there a need to further discern what funds do and or how they're intended to operate? Or is our recovery more focused on just the allocation?
I would say that it's more focused on the allocation, your recovery, because funds are already restricted, like Anna Marie said, based on the revenue source.
Okay.
Every year, the city goes through an audit. The auditors are checking to make sure expenditures out of those funds are within compliance. So that's kind of like your safety check, to make
Okay.
sure things are being paid out of the right funds, if that's the concern. Your focus now really is to make sure that, you can, basically your general fund is the problem child, is make sure that, any of the changes that you're making still will, make the general fund positive and be able to present a viable recovery plan.
That part definitely makes sense. I think I was more curious because the idea of creating a reserve has come up a couple of times. And so in terms of the recovery strategy, I just wanted to make sure we weren't.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. That's not anything that we're going to tell you that you need to do as far
Okay.
as your recovery plan. That is something completely separate, if council wanted to do that. For now, though, I think you're covered by the fact that you're taking the action in these funds, specifically your street fund and your state highway fund, to kind of build those up. So in essence, you're building the balances up, it's not, we wouldn't call it a reserve because it doesn't meet the definition under Ohio Revised Code as a reserve account, but those dollars are there. If you do a reserve account, there are certain other actions that council has to take in order to establish a reserve account. And then if you ever want to do it, there are more actions that you have to take as council. Whereas now, with just building the balances in the funds, you know that it's restricted to use within those street funds, the street highway, and you know that you can expend out of there based on allowable expenditures. No further action required from council on that.
Okay, thank you.
And definitely safer that it's not going to be used for anything other than the purpose for which the fund was created.
Correct.
So it's not I've got a little extra walking around pocket money over here that we're going to spend on something else, so.
You can do reserve funds, and there's been other discussions other than the street funds, because you brought that up. You can do some reserves out of the general fund and other funds. If you would have to look at 5705.13, which is the guidance for reserves, and there's several in there that's talked about, that has been brought up at commission meetings, I know as well, and that's really where you would want to have the guidance there. Several that's been brought up there, though, has been really out of the general fund, which is not a restricted fund. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
So
very helpful.
Yeah, anything that would require general fund dollars, you're not to that point yet because.
Right.
Right.
Because we're in the negative.
Gotcha.
Hence the conversation. Good.
Right.
I don't have a magic wand.
Anything extra we get in the general fund's going to pay down the general fund deficit. so.
Correct.
So I do have did we have any more questions or comments about the state highway fund? On the general fund on page 6, so on the recovery plan items, 2018 forecasted, so we've got, moving 2 street employees and moving the lighting out for this year. So we may or may not adjust this plan this year. We could. But because, our final numbers we're looking at the recovery plan items, 2022 forecast, it shows $419,000 in the positive. Can we go ahead and move these 2 items up to the actual execution in the plan? Because it's not going to affect that bottom line number. So
Which 2 items?
the 2 items of the movement of the street employees, we have 2 for 2018, and then the movement of lighting out of Fund 2 and 3 for 2018.
I would leave them down here for now because this is a change from what you had already presented in the prior recovery plan. Now, what happens is once that this is approved by the commission, then the city is going to have to change the appropriations, and at that point, they will be included in the appropriations up there.
Well,
Does that make sense?
at that point, though, it won't. I don't think they will be because we are, like these 2 street employees, we're not including them in the plan for 2018. We're only including them in the recovery plan part. So we won't have any appropriations for them if we don't move them up into the general plan.
We can double check, but I thought that because they're down there and approved in the intent, and then if you want to move them that year, we can still build them into the appropriations because they're down
Okay.
there.
Yes.
Perfect.
Does that make
Sorry,
sense?
I misunderstood your question. I apologize.
You're fine. No,
Yes.
that's perfect.
The
So
commission wants to see your recovery plan items down here below, so they can see everything that's impacting the bottom line.
Okay.
So basically, if you look at the page or 2 before this, whatever the total appropriations are, if they approve this plan, then we would say, okay, here's what the total appropriations were, come down, add these 2, we'll come back to city and make sure that city auditor gets the documents to council to approve the change in appropriations so that they are accounted for in those department budgets.
perfect.
But because it's there, we can do that without
Right.
another change to the recovery plan and all the process, which is
Yeah.
where you were going.
Yeah, I understand now.
Yep.
Is everybody, okay, good.
So I'm thinking timing here because our next, so the Fiscal Financial Planning and Supervision Commission meeting is 2 weeks from today at
Correct.
11:30, and that's the same day as our council meeting. In
So-
theory, if we approve this tonight or sometime before then, obviously we want to get it to the commission. If they approve that at the 11:30 meeting, could we, in theory, then have an ordinance assuming that that's going to be approved on the agenda
Yes.
for that evening, so
yes.
that we could meet the appropriations requirement for the county.
Perfect.
I mean, we could always, if they have the appropriation approved without showing up, even if we change it.
Even if we change it, this doesn't have to be in the appropriation for the county?
As you said, being as shown on here.
Right, but there's other expenditures though throughout this document that are higher in 2018 than what we had in the original fiscal recovery plan that we passed in 2017.
Right.
So there's many, it's not just that, there's a lot of there's other changes to appropriations that we'll also have to make to.
What I would suggest, if you're wanting to do the appropriations that night, I would probably do a change to match the forecasts above, before the recovery plan items.
Okay.
And I would have a second ordinance prepared, if this is, because you guys have to approve this first, and then the commission would approve it. I would have a second ordinance for sitting right there for just this piece as a change, is what I would do. Therefore, if something were to happen, and these aren't, allowable, whatever, the recovery plan is not approved, you don't have these set in that first ordinance change that you would have that night. Does that make sense?
I think you're saying the moving up of those employee pays, you're suggesting we keep that separate so that we could move forward with all the other appropriations.
Yes. Then you wouldn't have a timing issue.
I think,
This says movement of, my question is, at the risk of sounding obtuse, I was hoping I could be obtuse with them and not with the general public. This movement of street employees to each year,
Yeah.
and I thought that it was the street construction and repair fund for 18, there was only one.
Correct. You have the water fund in place too.
so it's more than one employee in that
I shouldn't say
178.
water fund employees. There's street employees in the water fund, they're being moved as well.
Okay.
Right. So there's one from the street and one from water in whatever year. And again,
That's why the numbers won't match.
more, yeah.
If
Gotcha.
you look at the street. yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to
That
make
makes
sure,
sense.
I wanted to question, I didn't
And
understand,
maybe
and I'm
it
sure
would-
that.
Maybe it would be better if it's labeled, if there's two lines.
Yes,
so that-
please.
Yes, I think it
Yes,
would be.
2 lines.
Just to clarify that, I think that would be,
Yeah, I think so, based on your
it would,
question.
yeah.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just about, passing the recovery plan. I'm trying to remember how we did this. Does it take an ordinance and 3 readings to pass the recovery plan, or do we just approve in one meeting?
The last
Mr. Gary, do you remember?
time.
I'm sorry, do you remember?
You did an emergency.
I thought it was an ordinance.
But you,
Yeah,
well,
it
it
was-
was an emergency, so there wasn't 3 readings. You suspended the 3 readings, I
Well,
believe.
yeah, we did them all in one night, but it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know if we just, at one time, approved.
Oh, we
it.
just say we move to approve the, no, it has,
Yeah,
we did an ordinance.
Yeah, and this
Mr.
is-
Gary, you prepared an ordinance for us to adopt the recovery plan?
He's about to shake his head.
He prepares a lot of ordinances
Yes,
for
he
us and
does.
does a lot of work for us, so
I can tell you in just a second.
yeah. But yes, so to while you're looking that up, to Mr. Sanker's point, I don't think that we can approve this tonight, because we need to get a few things changed, and we need to get the ordinance probably drafted if there was one. But we'll probably need to have a special meeting next week to.
We have a
finalize.
committee of the, we have a
It is
committee of
on
the
the
whole meeting?
19th, on
Yeah,
Monday.
Yeah, so we could have a council.
The agenda
meeting
is
that-
growing.
It
The agenda
is.
is growing on that.
That's why I asked the question, just for timing purposes.
Yeah.
We have to have 3 readings.
So right now, there is a committee of the whole meeting scheduled for the 19th at 6:30. And that was for the, Mr. Bonsall, your group about
Recycling.
fabric recycling. And then the mayor and Joe Gears had agreed to come for that session. And if you want to add this on, we can change the,
I mean, I feel like there won't
Did
be.
you have the C9 on there too?
please.
Did you
Yeah,
throw
we're gonna talk about the C9.
on there too?
I
we have
haven't
any-
yet. I distributed that just as a
Yeah, no, I
discussion
thought-
if you
I thought
want.
we did, but I just know.
If you want to, I hadn't, I hadn't done that, but that's something that I think we need to address sooner rather than later.
So can I, not to Harry whether or not we add this to the agenda, but I was wondering, and as it relates to the recovery items for the general fund, there are a couple of ideas that don't have dollar values, because in this case, like, we don't have a dollar value. But in terms of approving the plan, I mean, this is my first time helping approve the plan. I'm just trying to figure out how do we anticipate getting a better guess going? Is
For
that
the items that don't have an amount,
correct?
they're, yeah, they're up here, the 911 and the retiree health insurance, correct?
Yeah, those would be some. I think coming out of some discussions last week too, there may be some other movements that are maybe just still being discussed. Not to be super vague, but I was just, when I was reviewing this, I thought, well, in terms of being a policymaker, I'd love a stronger bit of data to know what could that potential impact be. So I just don't know. Like, is that still being vetted in terms of?
I'm gonna let Donna take the.
Okay, thank you.
Retiree health insurance portion of that, if you don't mind, because we don't have anything in there, but.
No, so basically what I did was, the last time that this was considered, when it was just the ordinance, people still had questions as to the nuts and bolts of who was gonna do what. And so what I did in the draft discussion that I gave to you all was to take the information that was in the ordinance, and I modeled the potential retirees' health benefit on a booklet that I got from my insurance. An
Okay.
introduction, definitions,
Yeah.
and then laid out the nuts and bolts of it. The only thing that I took the liberty of changing in that plan that I distributed to you was no one wanted ownership of it. No one department wanted to do it. The mayor didn't want to do it because he is in the plan, and Mr. Gears potentially could be in the plan. The auditor's office didn't want it. Nobody wanted to do it. And so basically what I did was that if and when council passes the benefit plan, that the first year, I, as president of council, would write the letter informing everybody who was currently receiving the plan that council had adopted a change. Give them a copy of the plan, talk to them about the administrative committee, and ask if anyone was interested in serving on that committee. The clerk of all those responses would come back to the clerk of council's office to attention retirees health care, so that we could segregate those out. We then would get a list, Mr. Gears and I could get a list of anybody who was interested in that serving on that administrative committee, sending out notice to all of the current people to come to a meeting and to elect whoever is going to represent them on the administrative council. And then once that is done, then the administrative council will own the notifications each year. And it laid out specific timelines for when all this was to be accomplished this year, so that people who might not be eligible, who are on it now, who might not be eligible, would have time to perhaps get other insurance or do whatever they needed to do to ensure coverage. I have no idea how much that will save, because we don't know how many people will respond and how many people will be eligible. That's why I think we need to get it done, so that administrative committee can do that review and know exactly how many people they approve. And once that's done, then we can make the forecast of how much that'll save.
If any,
Then, next year.
if any.
If any.
Now, the other thing would be, if you wanted a hard number to say, okay, what can this save? You have the prerogative to vote to eliminate both. So when you could take that straight line across, 500,000, 400,000, and you could redline that out, and that'll give you a hard number. What
see
we
what you
were
mean.
working on last year and still are, is that if we do not eliminate entirely, we would eliminate the programs entirely, however, we would have another program in place
Right.
that wouldn't be as comprehensive as the current one, but would still, offer some benefit to the retirees.
Lump sum benefit that still would provide some benefit,
Yeah.
some level of benefit to retirees, but would make the predictability of our expenses much more
So, I mean-
reliable.
Okay.
So, I mean, so there's
Because right
two
now, we have a
options.
lot of unfunded liability. We have no idea what those liabilities could
Right.
potentially be.
Okay.
So, but on the 911 review, that is really a tough nut to really put a number to, because it actually depends on negotiations with the county, and then what they actually would charge per call, and what qualifies as a call, if it goes through our place here, if it goes directly there, how much do they charge, how many calls do we actually get, how many, and so it's because there's still going to be some personnel involved, so it's not going to be a complete wash. And you're going to have to still pay the county to take care of so it's a pretty in-depth review, and, and I assume that they're talking to somebody.
There is a review in place right
Yeah,
now.
so, I mean-
I've been talking with a couple of people here, and then once that review's done, I told them that we would look at that as well, to make sure of the accuracy of numbers and stuff, but there is work in progress right
Yeah,
now.
so I mean,
Okay.
but it's hard to really put a definite number on it, even once you get it, and they give you, okay, it's gonna be this, well, if we all of a sudden get an influx of calls, you're gonna, your expenses are gonna be that much more than anticipated, so it's not a concrete number, but at least it's being looked at, so.
Does that make
That's
sense?
And I would
very
encourage any
helpful.
of you
Yeah.
to make comments on whatever on that retirees healthcare plan. Before you all got it, I submitted it to the law director's office for them to review, about a week before you all got it, so.
Could we find out if there's any updates before the committee of the whole meeting next week in terms of the law department's review?
Mr. Gary, in your spare time, have you been able to look at the, and I say that facetiously, to look at the retirees healthcare plan?
I don't see any particular problems with what you've prepared so far.
Is based purely on your ordinance, thank you very much.
Okay.
Incidentally, if you're interested, the council did approve an ordinance approving the detailed financial plan for the city of Norwood and declaring an emergency under 16/2017.
Thank you. Get another one ready.
Is there any other questions or issues or?
Quick questions, just overall, if we could again review the dates of when this has to be finalized, and not just the county appropriations, but the actual, when this goes to state.
So the Financial Planning and Supervision Commission meets on March the 27th, and they meet at 11:30.
Right?
That is also the date of our council meeting, so we have to do something prior. Our council meeting obviously will be after that committee meeting. So we definitely have to have some kind of a meeting, special meeting, or obviously a special meeting, to pass the financial recovery plan so that it can be presented to the commission on the 27th.
I guess the question
And
is,
then we also have to have an appropriations ordinance to the county by the end of March.
in Wool.
No?
You passed a full and permanent appropriation.
Right.
And does that count?
But-
That's okay?
Yeah, that met the requirement for the March, and actually did it before January. So
It was
you
in
have your full
December, yeah.
permanent in. However, I know that there are several keys
That
that
are,
have issues, so there is a need to adjust the appropriations to be more in line with
with the financial recovery plan.
now, because that was based on the recovery plan that was done in July of last year for 2018, and so several things changed in 17, which affected 18. So that would be the reason why you would need to do some appropriation changes, but you've met your third.
But there is no March 31st deadline for those. Oh, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, sorry, I did not know that.
I figured that maybe because we were in fiscal emergency, that we had to have an appropriations that was reflective of our financial recovery plan.
Well, you do.
Eventually, but not by March
You do not
31st,
have time
okay.
by March 31st. But if you want to approve it that night, I would do the suggestion I gave earlier of having 2 amendments with the recovery plan items in the second one.
But we could potentially wait until the dust cleared and do it in April.
That depends on the needs and some of those keys, I would say. So you.
Are there some that are
you
that
really
close?
want
Like
that.
recreation, for yes, I'm getting all kinds of emails. So yes, we should
He's not
definitely
the only
shoot
one.
to do it for the March 27th. I mean, the two other items, like the fiscal recovery plan items that we talked about, the street employees and the lighting, that's not urgent, but we definitely, the recreation department needs to get chlorine, and there's
Gotcha.
other things as well. So. Yeah, we should shoot for the 27th if possible. So the question is there any does anybody see any serious objections to this? We might even be able to schedule a special council meeting at 6 o'clock that day of the committee of the whole. I mean, we could or 6:15. I have a feeling it's not going to be a super long one because we've had we've had quite a bit of discussion about this. So is there anything though that we see changes that we can see right now that we want to make to it, or want to ask to be made to it?
How do you all feel about the seasonal employees?
I think in the last week, I've heard both. We want to take them out and we want to keep
Yeah,
them in.
I don't know.
And I guess I would appreciate knowing exactly what are they doing, and if they stop doing that, what kind of impact does that have? I mean, we know we've got a very strong volunteer base here. So is it something as simple as like more people just picking up trash, or are we talking about like major things going that could become a hazard? Like, I'd like a little more insight to know.
My understanding it's things like, weren't we told, things like grass cutting, getting ball fields ready, things like that.
I think that, yes, they are used for that purpose. I don't know if that's their full job, but I think they're used partially for that. Are there other employees, though, that could cover it? I'm not sure. I mean, $70,000, it would be nice in our plan to not allocate that, but if we're going to see services cut because of it, then we should definitely look into it, so.
You could also look at one in seasonal employee.
I was just going to say, what about one?
You have, there's different kinds of options that you could look at too. I'm not telling you to do that or which way to go. I'm just saying, don't just pigeonhole 2 in 16 weeks. You can do 1 or 2 in less weeks and things like that. We would just need to know the intent of council and be able to produce a reasonable expenditure for that.
Then yeah, I agree with Leslie. I'd like to see their job descriptions and what impact it would have if we didn't fund those positions. I think would be very helpful.
And we can always add, just one option, we could add them to the fiscal recovery plan and then just wait to appropriate the dollars for it, not appropriate the full amount. I mean, I think, is that an option, or not a good option? That's
Whatever
not a-
your intent is and what you pass in the recovery plan should be reflective in your appropriations.
Yeah, so,
Because if you think about at each commission meeting, we have documents that we show what that the total appropriation in the accounting system matches the recovery plan, and then we're monitoring percentage-wise.
Yeah.
So I would put it there, put it in the appropriations, but then if you don't intend to utilize it, I mean, at least it
And
matches
move it
the
out.
recovery plan.
okay.
Because these ladies point out if we're like 33% into the year and somebody's expenditures are at 50 or 60%, like you better have an explanation as to why. Or if we're at 25% of the year and you've not used anything, there should be an explanation as to why you're not doing that when other funds might be going in the negative, so. And James, I'm assuming that you're going to move forward with moving the lighting out and these employees.
I think that would be the best to
Is
do.
that it? We certainly can't vote in here, but the intent is, does anybody have any objection to that, to moving those 2 employees out in 2018 and the lighting from the street construction and repair fund into the general fund?
Yeah, and there's just one from the street, but yes, 2 that go to the general fund.
Ms. Stevenson, you're looking, I want to make sure you're okay.
I have a question that's not related, but I was thinking on what you said.
Okay.
In response to what you just asked, I think what April and Anna Mary
Yeah.
have expressed about the funds being more clean makes sense.
Okay. So can you do an update reflective of those changes?
Well, I think she said that, because they're in the end, in that plan down at the bottom, we can add those to the appropriations because they're in the fiscal recovery plan items.
Okay.
Because ours are intent, so they will be, but I think we might
So
do a
they're
separate
okay,
one.
the way they are?
I'll let you
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Gotcha.
I'm going to, here's the changes. We're gonna go over what the changes we've decided to, for tonight,
Okay, great.
So at the bottom, where it says the street employees to each year, we're gonna split that and show street fund and water fund. It won't change numbers overall, but you'll see where they're coming from.
Okay,
Right now, the seasonal is out until you tell me of an intent of differently and whatever that intent is. Also, in the street construction and repair, I am going to double check when the water person was coming out, and you expressed that you want them to come out actually this year instead, correct? Or not?
We can make them, I'd say we can start it in 2019, that would probably be fine.
2019, okay. So I will look to see when they were coming out, and we'll move them into the 2019 year if they're not already there. And those were the items that I had written down for changes, and then we were going to look to see, that might not be this week, examples of capital improvement plans that we can send to you guys to kind of look at what different options there are for that.
Yep.
Was there something else that I missed in my
Good.
notes?
On those capital improvements, did we want to ballpark a percentage of that money that's
In the street fund.
available in the street fund? I think we need to do that for the final.
So would we put it separately from the materials and service, contractual
Yes,
services?
there would be capital out.
Yes,
I would
okay,
list it
yeah.
as capital outlay.
Yes, if we're going to put it, yes, I agree with that. I think that we should, use your recommendation and leave a reserve each year, but,
Right.
yeah, I
I'm
think
not
that's a
sure
good
what the
idea.
amount should be.
Yeah, I don't know, 200,000, whatever you think.
I don't know. I guess I would talk to Mr. Gears about, any potential street projects possibly that are coming up. that
Oh, okay,
he
one
thinks
minute more
of.
meant that, yeah, I'd say the outlay. I would say if we estimate the capital outlay to be at, the entire fund balance except for I don't know, 100,000, 200,000, whatever what do you recommend that we should leave?
Can we do it this way? I'm just throwing it out because we haven't talked. Instead of putting expenditures in now, can we kind of act like this is like on here for the 911, that we will discuss that, yes, there is plans to do that.
Yeah,
and
you
they're
can
working
put it
on
at the
that.
bottom without.
That's a
Can we
good
just put
idea.
it on the bottom
Absolutely.
with zeros for now and state that you are in the process of looking at that, and so then we're not pigeonholing a number.
We're not just building balances and we can
It may
identify.
not come up
yeah.
to that.
Right, so then we would add a line, like, we would say, review of street improvements, and have them zero for now until we had more
Yes.
information. Is that fair?
Would they go in the general fund though?
Not in the general fund, I was using it
Oh,
as an
you're
example.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No,
Yeah,
you're
we're
fine.
pointing to the general fund
You're
on the
fine.
screen, you're right.
Yeah.
Can I, along those lines, when we get more definitive, should we pass a new retiree healthcare plan, and should we have solid numbers and move in a different direction with 911? How do we then incorporate that fully into the plan? Do we need to do a whole new?
Well, as soon as numbers would become available, okay, so let's say that you all take action and you move forward with retirees healthcare, because that's kind of on the table. As soon as that goes into effect and we have a dollar number, which Ms. Lake said, once there is that administrative body together and we have a number, we will incorporate it.
Gotcha.
And they just change the numbers and we update the plan. Or it will happen for next year.
Right.
Because those expenditures will take place next year.
Right.
Or savings will take place next year. Potential savings.
Right.
So if the administrative committee were put in place in 18, and they come up with a lump sum, let's say by August, and they're notifying folks, the plan could get updated then?
Absolutely.
Okay,
You can update this plan as new information comes available.
okay.
And not knowing when the plan would be passed, I think in the current in my draft, I think it says that the voting or whatever would take place no later than November 30th, because that administrative council then starts sending out the letters, having people
Okay.
apply. So the earlier the better, obviously. If we get it passed, we can always move up those timelines. There are no later than dates in
Yeah.
there.
When you would update this, you're gonna go through the same process too, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or changes? I will put that into the street construction fund. Do we want something in the state highway as well with that same type of line for plan items? Okay, we will do that for both.
All right. So right now, we have the committee of the whole for the 19th with the fabric recycling, the mayor. If you want to throw in the C9, we can do that. We talked about it, but I didn't officially do it. We just kind of tossed it out there as a potential. I foresee a special council meeting passing
Yeah, next week. would-
Sometime-
Oh, yeah, so.
sometime next week, a special council meeting to pass the recovery plan.
We can do it, I mean, I personally think we can do it Monday at 6:15 probably and get it done, or 6 o'clock and get it done, but do we want to add that to that day? I mean, that makes that day even longer. Are you all okay meeting Monday at 6, or?
I'd rather do it all in one day, but that's me.
Okay.
Do we, okay, so we'll have items out, we'll have a discussion draft out, well, no, it won't be a discussion draft, I guess.
It'll be that- yeah, it'll be
It will have to be the final draft that we can distribute by email.
So it'll take, to pass it in that day, I mean, it'll take 3 readings of council, so we'll need.
6 votes
6
to
people.
suspend.
Yeah, so do you anticipate you being able to make it on Monday at 6 o'clock?
There's a committee of the whole meeting at 6:30, and we're thinking of maybe a special council meeting at 6 to hopefully pass the financial recovery plan.
So, and of course, depending on traffic, that's,
Yeah, it was terrible this today.
yeah.
How about 6:15? Will that help you?
Take a vacation day on Monday just for this.
Don't take, no.
I'll be driving back. But I'll be back by then.
I have a couple of questions that I would want to get some more insight into. And I'm not sure that we get responses by that time on Monday. So I'm wondering if we could also look at a secondary date that week. Or even ahead of, well, maybe the following Monday even. I'm remembering there's at least one item we've left in committee with the finance committee that I think could have some impact on the plan. But we have not reported out on it, and so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I do think that needs a little bit more vetting and I just don't know how long that would take.
Yeah, so what Leslie's talking about is the Pace Telecommunications on Norwood Community Television. They have traditionally we've sent them our cable TV dollars that we've received from our franchise fees. And so now we have Cincinnati Bell. So it was an exclusive contract with Time Warner Cable, but now we have Cincinnati Bell that also does cable TV. So the question, I think last year we had about $58,000 in revenue. And the question is, Finance Committee still hasn't really talked about, and of course it's going to be a council decision as a whole, but we haven't really talked about our recommendations yet for, do we want 100% of those funds? Do we want 50% of those funds in the future? Do we want up to maybe $30,000 of those funds and the rest just go to the city's general fund? How much do we want to in the future allocate any of those funds to Norwood Community Television, because they can't continue to operate right now with the funds that they have, with everybody cutting the cable or going to Cincinnati Bell. They can't continue to operate with the budget that they have right now because it's just been declining over so many years. So that could potentially, I guess, affect the fiscal recovery plan, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do you know what was estimated for our, I know that's like a small revenue, but
So that would have been in the cable franchise fees area, which is in your miscellaneous revenues in the general fund. And if you look at it, it is really flatlined
Okay.
for 18 through 22. And I know in discussions that I have heard and some numbers that have thrown out, I know that that number has increased from 15 to 17. So that potential for it to be more is there as well. We would need to know what type of expenditures are going out and things, so that definitely would affect this. I mean, it seems small, but that would affect the recovery plan. So if we'd have an update for that, that would be good, actually.
But to make it clear, the checks that come in are specifically for the franchise fees. They're labeled as franchise fees that were meant in the past to provide or community television, whether they were from Time Warner Cable or whether they're from Cincinnati Bell, so.
I know there's been lots of discussions on
Yeah.
that too, so.
So the question would be, if we do decide, like finance committee wise, we say, hey, for 2018, we think that it would be right, it would be in the best interest of the city of Norwood to allocate, let's just say 50% of those funds, and then maybe look at something different for 2019. If we decide to make that change, I mean, that's not really I guess it is an expenditure. So would we need to update this plan to do that? Okay.
Yep.
So
I would.
I think, well, knowing that and knowing that it really would be good to have a plan that's allocated. I mean, we should probably at least estimate some funds for the plan that we're going to put for Cincinnati Bell. I mean, I would personally propose, for this year, 50% of the cable, the Cincinnati Bell part of our cable television revenue going there.
Is this something you guys are discussing here soon?
So
It's in Finance Committee, I don't know.
It's in the finance, so it hasn't come to the council yet, okay.
Correct. Was that last week?
Yeah.
I think it was just last week, and we had made a request to the board chair to be able to see the annual budget, to know what kind of gap there was, so we could consider an appropriate response. So I don't know the timeline of getting that back, but
Have you gotten any of that yet?
I got it around 6:30 tonight.
We can amend it as well, which is April just did. So if it's not determined by then, we can amend it like we've talked about with the C9 retirees portion too. So
It just
that's an
it's
option.
just more work for council, because like Anne Marie said, you have to go back through all these steps again before we take it to the Financial Planning Supervision Commission.
You did bring up an interesting thing that I need to ask now too. I believe there's something that's supposed to be coming for a department as well that is not built into this plan over personnel things. So depending on how council approves a certain ordinance for a department, that would have to be built in as well with some estimates. So I don't know if that's tonight. I thought it was, if it's coming or not, for the Treasurer's Department, or...
It's on the agenda.
Okay, so I definitely need to be updated on where that stands after tonight, for sure, since it's coming to council. And if there's anything else that we haven't really discussed, then that's something I would need to know as well. If something would happen tonight especially, that would potentially change that recovery plan.
Okay.
So the Finance Committee is now prepared to report out anything on the cable television access fees?
We're not tonight.
Okay. And likely wouldn't be, even if we had another special council meeting. You don't have a Finance Committee meeting scheduled
We're
again?
planning on having one next week. The date's not been set at this point.
We can definitely amend, though, if it's still not addressed by, we really need to have something for the commission meeting, but we can still amend later and just kind of report on that at the commission meeting as well.
Okay.
Donna could do that during her president of council, if you would like.
Well, it sounds like the information is coming in that we
Yes,
requested
yes. I think
as
that-
of today, so we could,
I think the Finance Committee will be able to make
Yeah.
at least a recommendation to council by the end of next week, whenever we meet.
Okay. So I guess again, do we want to do a special meeting on the 19th, or should we put it off till
Let's-
later?
Yeah, maybe it should,
Maybe it's better off later on.
yeah,
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Wednesday or Thursday.
Monday,
Yeah, or that Monday, the 26th. I know that the.
if we're sure we're going to have
they would
6
probably rather have
votes.
it earlier, but,
Assuming we're going to have 6 votes.
yeah.
Yes, please.
So what's your pleasure?
We're
I
looking
think
for
maybe I will
something-
add the C9 Trust on to the 19th Committee of the Whole, so we can get that in progress, so that if that's approved, then we can maybe have that on the agenda for the 27th meeting, which will get that stuff in progress a little bit more. So what's everyone's availability? Next week or on the 26th?
The 26th is preferred for me, but I know it's cutting it close. There's a Citizens on Patrol training that I'm going to at the Cincinnati Police Department. They do all of our COP training, so Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week I'll be there. But I could also skip one of those days or be there a little bit late, so.
Do you have to get the finance committee meeting
Yeah,
between now
we've
and
got-
then though,
yeah,
so
Yeah, we've got to throw that on there somewhere, so.
All
maybe
right, so I'm going to
Thursday?
take a leap of faith, and I'm going to say that we're going to have a special council meeting on March the 26th
Okay.
at 6:30.
Okay, let's do it.
Purpose of the special meeting will be to pass an appropriations adopting the financial recovery plan. We'll be at 6:30 here in council chambers on March the 26th. Anything else for the good of the committee? Thank you, ladies. I know you have a long drive home. We appreciate you staying and all of the work that you do.
I'll get it on Friday.
We'll adjourn the committee of the whole meeting. Thank you.
I said, hopefully he can read and write again.
Who's going to announce it? Sanker?
Sanker.
Okay.
So we can amend to add this. Here you go.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah.
That's a nice, that's a nice award. All right, gotta change. Gotta change the hats here.
So to make it.
Oh, actually, I signed it, but I saw
Yes.
your name. I shouldn't
Here I
have
thought
signed
we were
it.
going to
You don't
have
need to read my name.
two meetings,
You actually-
consecutive meetings with no amendments.
Can you get me a committee report? I guess I should report out our committee of the whole.
A cover.
Just the cover thing?
Yeah.
Like now?
You can
Yep.
do it the next day.
We
You
can
not-
add, can we add that?
Yeah, I was thinking amend it, or you can do it the next meeting. I don't think it's any better.
I'll start with that one.
Yeah,
I promise I won't.
I've got to go make some photocopies as well. Okay, this is for secretary. Feel free to read it. It's the same basically. I took out like the rest of the finance. We just put we.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it.
Marilyn sent me a text. She wanted you guys.
Oh, thank you.
So that'll be the 4th.
Yes.
That's fine.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
If you correct us. James, you want just pass it around and have people sign it. This regular meeting of council will be called to order. Please rise for the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall. Here. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Ms. Stevenson.
Present.
Mrs. Hanahan. Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Breeden.
Here.
We do have 6 members present, so we will proceed. We have 2 requests to amend the agenda. The first is to add a committee of the whole report under item number 4 reports of standing committees of council. And then also to add as communication number 4, a letter from Rachel Babbage from MAD regarding an award of excellence. Ms. Stevenson.
I move to amend the agenda as you described.
Seconded by Mr. Bonsall. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have the minutes of the February 27th regular meeting and the March the 7th special meeting. They were distributed previously by email. Mr. Clark?
Move to approve the minutes as of read.
Excuse me. Seconded by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion? Mr. Clark?
I just want to thank Mr. Gears. Once again, a very thorough analysis of the meeting, and I really appreciate that when you're referring back how easy it is to find things. So thank you so much.
Sent him an email to that effect. It was a good job. It could have been ugly. There's a lot of stuff said. You made it look very organized. Thank you. Excuse me. The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes as if read. Call the roll, please.
Stevenson.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stevenson.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm with the clerk of council, a couple of comments I sent via email. There was just a correction that I wanted for our regular meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
With regard to, I shared under new business about coffee with council, and I just wanted to clarify, as I read the notes, I realized there's a line that says the first cup of coffee is free. That event is actually sponsored by a campaign. It's sponsored by Stevenson for Ward 1.
Okay.
So it is not as if Brick Coffee is giving
Gotcha.
away free coffee
Okay.
for the day. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clarified here.
Okay, I can revise that.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have 2 requests to address council, but they're not on agenda items, so we'll save those till later. We'll move on to reports of standing committees of council. The first is a finance committee report regarding the secretary to the clerk of council pay. Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, to whom was referred the Secretary to the Clerk of Council pay, beg leave to submit the following report. The previous 2 employee secretaries to the Clerk of Council started and ended at $13.72 an hour. We recommend a $13.50 an hour starting pay for the current Secretary to the Clerk of Council. Respectfully submitted, James Sponsel, Andrew Clark, Leslie Stevenson, John Breeden.
Mr. Clark, do we need, I'm sorry, Mr. Bonsall, do we need to indicate that that is back pay to the start date?
Yes. It was retroactive. so.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that's clear in there.
It wasn't super clear in the report, but it was definitely the starting
Perhaps
pay.
whoever makes the motion to accept the report can make that just a suggestion, so they can include that in their motion. Mr. Clark?
I move to accept the committee report and also have it state that the clerk of council's pay will be retroactive from her start date.
The secretary to the clerk of council.
Exactly, thank you, thank you.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Braden. Is there any discussion? I think if this is approved, I think we need to send a letter to that effect to the auditor's office to make sure that that is communicated and that she can be back paid. Any other discussion? Ms. Stevenson?
Yes, I too was recalling a letter to the auditor. I wanted to just express it was difficult to discern the appropriate rate because there was a lack of documentation as to why others had started above the base pay. We heard clearly a couple of times the skills that Ms. Hill brings to the role, and I was concerned that with the lack of documentation, we may not be able to offer her enough based on just not having documentation in terms of what skills warrant what level of increase. So I'm pleased that we are able to offer her something above the base pay, but just I would ask that as we move forward, whether it's the clerk of council or other departments that are coming before us with either recommendations or suggestions around pay, that we have clear documentation to help us consider what's the cost implication, what's the value of the role, and really what type of feedback or growth. I mean, if people started and ended in the same role, at the same pay, and it's above the base, just would like to have more insight as to why.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Any other discussion? So the motion on the floor is to accept the committee report and to send a letter to the auditor's office indicating that that level of pay is back to the starting date. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a Finance Committee report regarding an ordinance amending 33-2009. Mr. Bonso?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, to whom was referred the amendment of Ordinance 33-2009, beg leave to submit the following report. We met to discuss pay and positions in the Treasurer's Office and the proposal to add a tax clerk position to Ordinance 33-2009. We discussed the following topics regarding the amendment. 1, the current state of city finances. 2, the treasurer has not taken all actions available to fill the positions as they're currently approved. 3, the need for all appointed position salaries to be increased. The Finance Committee is reporting out the ordinance with no recommendation for or against passage. It's respectfully submitted. James Bonsall, Andrew Clark, John Braden, Leslie Stevenson.
Mr. Clark?
Move that the report be accepted.
Seconded by Mr. Braden. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is the Economic Development and Community Engagement Committee report. Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Economic Development and Community Engagement, to whom it was referred, LISC, Small Business Tools, and Committee Goals, beg leave to submit the following report. On our first topic of business development tools, Amber David, a LISC Small Business Specialist, shared about the Local Initiative Support Corporation and the support they offer to small businesses. Ms. Davis specifically highlighted their partnership with Kiva, which is a nonprofit organization that allows individuals to borrow money. Through LISC, applicants can receive a one-to-one match to achieve their goals. Ms. David provided insight into application process, the role of people who back the project with their personal funds, like other crowdsourcing opportunities, and the role of the trustee, the person whose character is the collateral for the borrower. Handouts were distributed at the meeting and will be attached to this report. They'll also be posted, they'll be added to the Facebook Live post for public access. Loans can be up to $10,000 per borrower and have been used locally in Walnut Hills as well as in Madisonville. We discussed whether the committee, the Economic Development and Community Engagement Committee, could serve as a trustee for applicants in Norwood. providing a service for residents who may want an organization rather than an individual to fulfill that role. We learned from Ms. David there are Kiva cities, which allows for residents to have a dedicated way to support local business development. In Columbus, which is the closest, there is a dedicated Kiva website showcasing borrowers building barbershops, kayak tour companies, and bakeries. The benefit of the Kiva City model, which was expanded to a national model in 2011, is support from other stakeholders in the community too. The partnership is between Kiva and the City of Columbus, and trustees include the bank, Huntington Bank that is, the Columbus Foundation, United Way of Central Ohio, Franklin County, Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, and the Greater Columbus Arts Committee. As a committee, we'd like to recommend two things. One, seeking space on the current city's website, as in Norwood City's website, to organize small business information and resources, and allowing this committee to continue researching the process of becoming a Kiva city. We believe that small businesses can help shape the culture of our city, and that they would be more likely to utilize some of our existing vacant buildings in our business zones. Finally, for this topic, in addition to small business resources, LISC also has and is available to present on housing, real estate, and pre-development funding sources, tools, and planning assistance. We anticipate inviting Ms. David back at a later time and potentially planning some workshops for residents to attend. Our second topic was committee goals. I think I'm going to mess up this last name again.
Orris.
Orris. Thank you so much. I just had lunch with Greg. Orris. Greg Orris is the consultant who is hired to work as the Economic Development Director for the City of Norwood. He is a city planner by trade for Warren County and on a daily basis works in Norwood on Fridays. Mr. Orris has been in his current role in Norwood since 2002. Mr. Orris was invited to share with the committee how his role might intersect with ours as we developed our goals for the committee. Mr. Orris clarified his role is more aligned to a city planner, providing landscape architecture and landscape design, including support for parks, zoning changes, consulting on facade improvements, creating renderings and paper drawings, as well as some beautification projects like painting light poles and planting trees. Mr. Orris also shared residential guidelines for codes are being updated for infill development to take place. Larger scale development projects are the purview of Mr. Jerry Stoker, also consultant, who serves as our building commissioner. Mr. Josie Gears, our safety services director, has oversight for our lights along with Duke Energy. We also noted that concerns of residents regarding the crosswalks may fall into the jurisdiction of ODOT. In future meetings, we will likely ask these persons or offices to attend and provide more clarity on their roles too. So in closing, we discussed the following as goals for the committee. Welcome to Norwood, creating a welcome experience so residents understand how we function and how to be an active citizen. Small business in Norwood, promoting resources to residents who want to generate revenue in our city. Neighborhood associations in Norwood, coordinating an approach for resident voice to help prioritize decisions council and administration are taking. Community engagement in Norwood, increasing transparency about development and upcoming changes to the city. And lastly, quality of life in Norwood, collaborating with the steering committee for the quality of life planning process to elevate resident ideas for strengthening the city. Respectfully submitted by Leslie Stevenson, Chairperson, John Braden, and Eric Thompson.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, I move that the committee report be received and filed.
Seconded by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is the Committee of the Whole report regarding the review of the Financial Recovery Plan. Dated March the 13th, 2018, to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. We, your Committee of the Whole, to whom was referred review of the Financial Recovery Plan, beg leave to submit the following report. Anna Mary Thomas and April Davis reviewed corrected totals to the general fund balances as well as discussed financial impacts of several items in the recovery plan items. We reviewed necessary timelines for final passage of the recovery plan. A special meeting of council will be called for March the 26th for adoption of the plan. Respectfully submitted, Donna Lake, Chairperson, James Bonsall, Andrew Clark, Eric Thompson, Leslie Stevenson, Joseph Sanker, and John Braden. Mr. Clark.
Move that the committee report be accepted.
Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We'll move on to second reading of ordinances. The first is an ordinance promoting the citywide street sale, May 11th and 12th, 2018, and abating all permit fees associated with the sale as amended. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move that we have the second reading of the ordinance.
Seconded by Mr. Clark. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Please have the second reading as amended.
Ordinance promoting the citywide street sale, May 11th and 12th, 2018, and abating all permit fees associated with the sale as amended.
We'll move on to introductory readings of ordinance by adoption of the Finance Committee report. We now have this ordinance that was recommended to be placed on council. So this is an ordinance amending Ordinance 33-2009 to add the position of tax clerk, to establish the tax clerk position salary, and declaring an emergency. Does anyone wish to make a motion on this? Mr. Sanker.
I recommend that the ordinance have all three readings of the ordinance.
To suspend the rules, have all three readings?
Yes, Madam President.
Is there a second? No second? So therefore, the motion dies. Is there another motion? Mr. Thompson,
I would motion that we have a single reading of the ordinance.
first reading. Is there a second to that? Mr. Sanker. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, I'm going to vote against this motion. I personally don't believe that, you know, if not every action that could be taken has been taken at this point. I think there's some things behind the scenes that haven't been disclosed that, I mean, nothing illegal or anything, but just I think there's reasons that haven't been disclosed that this change wants to be made. I just think that we should take any department that wants to come to us to request a net increase in, you know, salaries needs to show that there's some kind of a hardship that needs to be taken care of. Now, we do need to take care of all of the appointed position salaries. I mean, they're definitely, we have not had raises in appointed positions since 2009. And so it would be a very good thing to go ahead and at some point and work on trying to get these increased, or at least to take away the prohibition on raises. However, at this point, I don't think that we should do this piecemeal. I think that we should do it comprehensively, so I am going to vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, Madam President. To my understanding, there's nobody in this position at the present time, so there wouldn't be actually giving anybody a raise as far as in that position. It's establishing a position. The position may not even be filled potentially once it's even established. It may go back to the way things were. However, if it is filled, then the person would qualify for the starting salary there that's within that range. But it isn't giving anybody a raise because there's nobody in the position. The position doesn't exist at this time. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not in favor of this ordinance because I don't think there's ever been an ask for this position to be posted publicly. And I think considering a new pay scale sets us up to fail at attracting people to jobs that at least were created to be appealing. I think an audit change to one would facilitate a ripple effect with all. And based on what we just learned with our fiscal plan, I just don't think we have the bandwidth to respond in an appropriate way. I think there's been good discussion thus far. I would agree with Mr. Bonza. I think there's some things that either are not clear or not as clear as they can be in terms of steps the administration can take. So I will definitely be following up via email to find out where the outages are and communicating why this hasn't been posted publicly at the current rate.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Any other discussion? Mr. Thompson?
I tend to agree with your comments about this not being posted publicly. My issue with it not being posted publicly up to this point is that we've got an unfilled position in a tax office in the middle of tax season, and I worry that there are not the available people to do the work required of that office. I can't answer why this position hasn't been posted publicly, and it's quite honestly not my job to figure out why. It's not your job to figure out why. I've heard a couple different reasons why it hasn't been posted publicly, and that frustrates me a little bit. So I see your point. I also see the point of needing to fill a position in order for a department to be able to work effectively. That's what I'm basing my decision on. I understand that this has effects on the fiscal recovery plan, of course. Everything we do affects the fiscal recovery plan. However, as we've discussed, that we don't actually know how much this job is going to end up costing in the end. We have a range. So that's kind of my thoughts on the matter.
The motion on the floor is to have the first reading. Is there any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
No.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
No.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
No.
By a vote of 2 in favor and 4 against, the motion fails. Do we want to reconsider this at the next meeting or just leave it as it is? I'll wait for direction. Thank you. There are no introductory reading of ordinances nor administration reports, so we'll move on to other requests to address council. The first is Janet Smith. She's with the League of Women Voters. If you could come forward and just, please. Up here by the microphone so that folks at home can hear you as well. So if you can just give us your name and your organization, and you'll have 5 minutes to address council.
My name is Janet Smith. I'm with the League of Women Voters. I wanted to tell you all in Norwood that we are having a Metropolitan Sewer District update. It's not going to be like a normal update. We're going to have 4 tables. People are invited to go to a table for half an hour and speak directly to, we're going to 4 subjects: sewage, reimbursement, flooding, 1 table; sewage rates, task force, they came up, I went to the task force, they came up with 15 ideas for lower.
Sorry, I didn't pass them out to us.
Okay. They came up with 15 ideas. MSD has not done anything except the monthly bill. And then there's going to be one on the consent decrees. We are anxious, consent decree planning for 2 was supposed to be out June 30th. It has not been out. And you've got Mary Lynn Loader from MSD to talk to. On the 4th table, you've got the consent, you've got the commitment letter, in other words, the contract. It is up April 30th. And Gerald Checo himself, the retired director of MSD, will be there. And what you do is you sit across the table from him and ask questions. You go to the subject you want, sit there for a half hour, then we have a break. You can stay at that table for an hour, or you can switch to another subject. So you can get 2 subjects in an evening. And I would love to see some of the people from Norwood attend this. So it's not like somebody's up there talking to you. You sit at the table across from them and you ask them questions. So it's a different kind of forum. That's why I don't really like to use that word, because you think that's somebody that's going to just preach at you. But we have those 4 subjects, and we have experts at every single table. And I really appreciate some Norwood people coming out and coming to the event.
Before you leave,
Yes.
can you announce the date and the place for people at home so that they'll know that?
Oh, okay. Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church, parking in the back. Go down the hill. My husband will be directing traffic. And it is March 28th. Doors open at 5:30. Program starts at 6, 2 hours. We will have snacks, but don't come for that. They're not that great.
Any questions or
That's
comments?
fantastic. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very interesting. I can tell you Norwood was certainly impacted by sewer backups, flooding, reimbursement for home damage, so.
Yeah, and I will add, Madam President, that...
Mr. Bonsall?
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much.
Certainly,
Yep.
come on up.
Somebody told me no. I'm sorry. It's 103 William Howard Taft. Thank you.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. And there may not be a whole lot of people here, but there's quite a few people listening at home on Norwood Community Television, and many of them are very much concerned about MSD, not just with the rates, but with the sewer backup. So I think this was very timely information. This is a very timely, I guess, event for many Norwood residents. So I really encourage them to, anybody that's interested to show up. And I'll just repeat it. It's Wednesday, March 28th. From 6 to 8 o'clock, it sounds like she said, at Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church. So hopefully there's quite a few Norwood people there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. And next we have Michael Lance Alexander about financial alternatives. If you'll come up and give us your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes to address council.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you when I was walking up.
Oh, that's okay. Your name and address, and then you'll have 5 minutes to address council.
Lance Alexander at 2069 4 Acre. This is with regarding to some alternatives for city spending, as it's pretty much been brought to everyone's attention over the past almost 30 years. Norwood has an issue with finances, and especially over the past 2 years or so, where we've had trouble with the state officially putting us under a financial emergency. With the discussion on social media, a lot of us have mentioned our willingness to provide any of our skilled labor for many different areas to help offset these costs. Specifically, a project which I wrote up here, everyone likes catchy names, so this is Project CULL, to Cull City Spending, for civilian utilization and local leadership. Areas that we could help improve with this are a lot of the departments where we're actually out doing things. Property maintenance, building maintenance, grounds maintenance, volunteer operations during severe weather, where some of the unused buildings have been mentioned, like specifically an example was a homeless lady was either she broke into or was allowed into a apartment owner's basement, and the police escorted her out. And it was brought to a minor discussion that, you know, why don't we allow one of these buildings for severe weather? And, well, the simple answer was somebody has to pay for it, somebody has to volunteer, and sometimes when people do offer, they're told no by city leadership. I can't offer specific examples offhand, but that's what's been brought up. Other areas that could be improved would be along with the examples I provided. We have several skilled laborers as far as painters, construction, anything of the areas I mentioned. We have skilled labor who has volunteered to provide very low-cost alternatives to a lot of the contracted labor that's already in place. And then me personally, I have a lot of technical expertise, experience with most areas of information technology, specifically networking at the moment, but I offer to provide a free audit for the City of Norwood government. General knowledge on what you guys actually have as far as information support is slim to none. I've gotten several different answers, and it sounds like there is a lot that could be improved. The numbers I've been given on spending for what may be in place seem excessive for what I was told is actually the value. The value I was provided was roughly $70,000 for basic server and email support, which is beyond excessive. A lot of places take advantage of city government because we're the government, we have money, let's take it. And I think that's wrong, especially when you do have people in Norwood willing and able to do the work for basically cost. Materials, basic time. We have options. Contracts do limit us, but contracts can be amended. Where contracts are not in place, we can do independent contractor offerings, volunteer labor, which would require no tax involvement from the government. And I guess that's it, and this is just something I think would be very good for the government to consider, because we are a relatively small hometown that is very tight-knit, and there are a lot of people who would come to provide whatever assistance they could. We're not going to save millions, but if we save thousands and that fixes a few streets, no one's going to complain, and everyone's going to win.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question. Were the examples that you included here from a discussion on Facebook, or is this your personal proposal?
It's a mix of both. I
Okay.
didn't really elaborate in here because, I mean, it all ends up the same as far as being. And as far as my references I provided on what department does what, a lot of that kind of blurs together for me because you get different answers depending who you talk to on what day. But in the end, it's still the same. Whoever is going to say yes or no to whatever work in whatever department, there's somebody in Norwood who could do it cheaper, most likely.
I also want to say thank you for coming and sharing your ideas. I know there's a lot of discussion that takes place on Facebook, and it's hard to catch all of it. So I appreciate you making time to be here and share in person. I took some notes, and I was going to share, just so you know, as a relatively new council person, I don't know if there are laws that govern how much we can have residents do as volunteers. But that's something that I look forward to checking into, because there are, as you say, a number of residents who have said, we could take that on. I know that we have some projects. I mean, I think it was just yesterday.
Talk about it soon.
I won't steal her thunder, but we do need residents to volunteer. What the scope of that is, I don't know. But legally, I will say the idea that's here under Health Department around emergency shelter and coordinating something, Mr. Thompson brought that idea up, I think at our first council meeting of the year. And I don't know if that's something that's gotten momentum yet, but I do think we as a body were in agreement that having some coordinated efforts, at least around emergency assistance, would be a value add. So I just want to say thank you for putting that in our mind's eye again.
You're welcome, and I know there are some limitations to what volunteer work can officially be sanctioned, which is where project-based and short-term contract labor would be a lot more beneficial. Because from what I understand, we have a lot of long-term contracts that are hurting us because we can't dump them. And if we would not have given them excessive length contracts, we could boot them and find someone better.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I'll just want to also thank the resident, Mr. Alexander, for being here. And I hope that we can, the city administration, the public lands and buildings, IT person, I hope that somehow we can find a way to, allow some second eyes potentially, whether those be Mr. Alexander's eyes or other eyes on our IT spending. In particular, as we talk about IT spending, we need to talk about who we're paying to maintain our city website and what it might cost to get some improvements there. So I know that that's something that we all are pretty much, we've all talked about at some point or another. And so being able to potentially save a few dollars, if there is something we're getting charged for, and be able to reallocate those to, modernization of a really big image, driver of the city would be something I think that would be helpful. So I'll follow up with you offline and just see if there's a way we can connect. It's really up to the administration, I think, on when it comes to how they look at, who they're working with when it comes to their IT contracts. But if there's any way that you can offer at least a look and add some information,
I've offered to help renovate the website. I'm not a web design specialist anymore since HTML2, but I could look at what's there and rebuild it and give it a facelift.
Yeah, and I don't know how it's maintained today. So I appreciate the offer, and I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to figure out a way to allow you to assist with that. But I will at least follow up to see if there's what could we do, and because I know you do have, I've heard that or at least you've said that you've had a IT business as well. So potentially there could be some opportunity to utilize that. So who knows? But I'll at least send an email to the administration and see what we can do to move forward a little bit with that. So.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Alexander. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your time.
And I'll be talking about some of those volunteer opportunities in a little bit. Is there any unfinished business? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to respond to a comment that was made during our consideration of the ordinance amending, the ordinance amending the ordinance 33-2009. So it was stated at some point that, that it's critical during tax time to fill the position. We have to, we need to fill the position, and I agree completely. And I just want to emphasize that council has already approved the positions. There's a tax clerk that's a union position that was posted internally. The position, nobody internally wanted it. So at that point, from what I've been told by the safety service director, at that point, the department head needs to request the safety service director to send a letter to the Civil Service Commission. It sounds like a lot, but it really isn't that much, to post it externally so that they can do a test. And there's even processes in place that there can be an interim tax clerk that could be added to it. And so we could have that position filled, for tax season on an interim basis. And so I just want to, as I've encouraged the treasurer and, in text messages and the finance committee, I just want to encourage him to follow the process that's currently in place. The estimate was like $6,000 to $16,000 to fill the, position using, this flipperoo kind of thing that's there. I don't know why we're doing that if we haven't posted either of the appointed position or the current union tax clerk position externally. So I just want to encourage that. I think it's going to be good for the citizens to have a tax clerk in there, and I just hope that we can at least get an interim one in there so that citizens aren't affected at tax time. Thank you, Madam
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other unfinished business? Any unfinished business? We'll move on to new business. Mr. Clark.
Oh,
Go ahead. No, well, I just want to say that the playground, I probably should have been under unfinished business. The playground build will definitely take place on Saturday, June the 2nd. It is from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have a need for about 30 to 40 volunteers. I did create an event on Facebook, and there are 30 people who said they were coming, but I asked that they RSVP to my email, and only about 6 or 7 have done that, so I'm not quite sure whether all those 30 people will really show up or not. And that's my way of, I needed people to email me so I could follow up with them for for information and directions and stuff for that day. I do want to acknowledge that over the weekend, I was speaking to the owners of the Mound Cafe about it, and Julie Peter, who is one of the owners, has volunteered to provide barbecue and coleslaw and macaroni and cheese for the event. We'll also be soliciting some other businesses or vendors in Norwood for perhaps some other food, and just in case we have all these people show up. So if anyone is interested in doing it, again, it's a playground build at Northwoods Park, sponsored by Cincinnati Children's and La Mega Radio. Holes will be dug, all the equipment will be there. You just need to show up and just put the equipment together, mix concrete, install it. There will be curbs and mulch placed around all of the equipment. And the lady from Cincinnati Children's has, because we have enough curbs left over in the curbs that she has ordered, we will be putting the curbs around all of the playground equipment, not just the new stuff. And so we're going to go ahead and keep the little curlicue thing, since there'll be mulch underneath it, and so if somebody falls, they won't hurt themselves. So the only items taken out are going to be the big metal slide and the big metal merry-go-round that the kids love and the parents hate. So if anyone is interested in volunteering, again, if you will email me at dmlaake@gmail.com. Mr. Thompson.
I just want to say I was quick to, of course, confirm your invite and did not see or notice the part where it said to email you, so it might be worth making a post.
Yeah, it was the
under-
last thing to
Yeah.
confirm your
I skimmed that and
participation, RSVP2, and it had the email address. So.
Yeah, but you can add a line, just a post to the event,
Yeah.
and it might get more response.
Yeah, I will. And thank you for all those who are sharing. So it's all over the place. I think the last time I saw there was like 31 shares. So maybe we can get finished a lot earlier that day. Any other new business? Mr. Clark?
I just want to encourage everyone, the Norwood Star has launched a new website, and it's totally free to all Norwood residents. Well, anyone really can go on there. We have lots of new features and a community calendar and just lots of great things. So totally free now. So we encourage you to go check that out, norwoodstar.com.
norwoodstar.com.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any other new business? Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's been my intent as the Chair of Economic Development and Community Engagement to hold standing meetings first Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Going back a couple weeks, I had reached out to Metro and invited them to come to a meeting. This fall, Hamilton County might see on the ballot an opportunity to increase services, which would include the potential for bus rapid transit, BRT, which would travel along Montgomery Road through Norwood. We just got done talking about the state highway, and in consultation with our chair, felt like it might be more appropriate to schedule either a special meeting or a committee of the whole to have Metro come present. Currently, they are available Thursday, April 5th at 7 p.m. I think that's the right first Thursday number. And so I wanted to find out, generally speaking, would people want to come at that time and pursue one of those two options, or would we want to look at another time and invite them to come present as well? There's been outreach going on throughout the county, largely in Cincinnati. When I heard the plan presentation back in February, I immediately asked them to come to Norwood and share, so that residents, Hamilton County residents, Norwood residents, would be aware of what that potential is. So I wanted to ask for input.
Comments? April 5th too soon? What, Mr. Clark?
I'm not on the committee, but I would not be available that date, so I don't want to hold things up. I can always watch it on Facebook, but just throwing that out there. It is of interest to me, but I don't want to hold the process up.
It's April too soon. Mr. Bonso?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I'm very much interested in conversation. I'm on the committee, though. I'm available that day, so whatever's decided, I'll be there and looking forward to it.
Mr. Braden?
I'm also looking forward to that presentation, but unfortunately, I'm unavailable that evening. I apologize.
Are Thursdays generally bad, or just that Thursday?
just that Thursday. For me.
Is there, I mean, I was just curious, is having a committee of the whole, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Is there, like, having a committee of the whole, is that just so that more council members can engage in the conversation? Is that the?
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes, sorry, I didn't realize. Yes, because if transportation does increase, it could dovetail into public safety. It could dovetail into any thoughts around what kind of development might go on there. And I did not want folks on our committee to feel like we couldn't discuss the implications. I mean, transportation is just that, it's a connector. And I think because it's a county issue, I just felt like it was important for there to be outreach in Norwood as well. So really just creating awareness. This isn't anything we govern, but Montgomery is a large part of our city. So just want to make sure there's awareness and understanding of what our role could be or could not be as that county issue moves forward.
Is there perhaps another time? It doesn't appear as though maybe April the 5th would work. I'm wondering if we can explore another time?
We absolutely can, and there's not necessarily a rush. I just wanted to share that out since, as of now, that had been the plan.
I think it certainly has implications for everybody, so, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Bonsall?
I was going to say, yeah, any of those days that week, April 2nd through the 3rd, or 2nd through the 4th, so. And I'll let you maybe you can come up with some dates and bring them back to us. Or.
I'll do that. I'll look at some dates and share back out.
Okay.
Thanks for your input.
Great, thank you. Any other new business? Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, we're going to be calling a committee meeting of the Housing, Health, and Public Safety for March the 20th at 6:30. And on the agenda will be the vacant city properties and building and construction permits.
And it's here in council chambers?
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. So Tuesday, March the 20th at 6:30 p.m., Housing, Health, and Public Safety.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. Any other new business? Just want to remind folks that we do have a committee of the whole meeting at 6:30 on March the 19th. On that agenda currently is the fabric recycling and the mayor and the first of our meetings with department heads, and we're going to start with the mayor and the safety service director. I would also like to add to that committee of the whole meeting a discussion on the draft plan of the city or the retirees' health insurance. So those 3 items will be on the committee of the whole agenda. And as noted in our committee of the whole report that was just reported out tonight, where there will be a special meeting of council for Monday, March the 26th at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers. The purpose of that special meeting is to adopt the financial recovery plan, which will need to be passed that evening so it can be presented to the Financial Planning and Supervision Commission the next morning. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you. I had one more new business item.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we have a Norwood resident, Christy Sargent, that is a member of Crossroads, and there's really actually, from what I've been told, there's like 1,000 to 2,000 members of Crossroads that live in Norwood, which is pretty incredible, the impact or the vastness of that. But anyways, the reason why I bring that up is that Crossroads has this thing called Go Local, where they go, it used to be called Go Cincinnati, where they go and do projects all around the tri-state. And actually, at this point, because Crossroads is more of they're starting to turn into a nationwide church. They've got Lexington campuses, and they're starting out campuses all over the place, that there's actually projects going on across the country. And so, so they've actually allocated 40 projects. So these projects are like $200, 5 to 15 kind of volunteer projects that they want to do in Norwood. The only problem is that they don't actually have enough projects that are submitted to fill that 40 project kind of quota that they have. And so some of the project ideas that are likely going to happen at the community gardens, there's likely going to be a project to do mulching in preparation for the year at the community. I'll defer to the Madam President to talk about the community center if you'd like in a second. There's going to be some projects there. There's probably going to be projects that are litter kind of patrol projects. We're going to have people on both sides of Montgomery Road picking up litter, and then they kind of meet in the middle and maybe at Victory Park or something like that. So there's quite a few projects that are likely going to happen because they've got people that are kind of behind them. But if there's, churches that are, in need of some help, I know at least at the church that I go to, they've helped us in years past with some landscaping, but there's churches that need help, other nonprofits, or even things that we as a council think as a city, that we should, hey, let's submit that. Last year they did some landscaping out beside the building, and they put some mulch on some trees along Montgomery Road. And so just want to encourage this council to think about that. If you are interested, Christy Sargent, Kristi, Sargent's on Facebook, but just reach out to me and I'll get you all connected and kind of see how we're going. But I'd love to also hear an update from our council president about some of the projects that we hope might happen at the community center.
I submitted one for the community room at the community center. There are so many groups that use that, and the carpet is nasty and it needs to be replaced. And so I submitted a redo of that room to remove the carpet, to repaint the room, and then to have some laminate floor put down. That is a lot more practical than carpet. I'm sure there are asbestos tiles underneath there, so covering it with laminate would be appropriate, and then to scrub those tables and chairs down, and I'm pretty sure that that's been accepted as far as I know. Those are the ones that I submitted. The one that I submitted, I know there are other people who are submitting other potential jobs as well, so that's what I submitted. Mr. Bonzo, you have others?
Well, no, I was just more curious so I know that people are submitting projects across the city, so ones that involve city property, do you know how we're kind of getting those approved through the city?
That had to be sponsored by Jenny Wallace, because somebody in the city has to be on site. They have to let them in, they have to be on site, and then they have to close up afterwards. And so while I submitted it, I had my name, but also submitted Jenny Wallace Parton as the contact for that. And so they're going to work with her to get into the building and arrange and do those sorts of things. Mr. Thompson, you have an update?
No, not an update so much, just as a follow-up to what Lance was talking about earlier, is the processes that people who want to volunteer with the city need to go through. We're a little bit inside, who to go through. Who knows, there could be somebody out there who would love to paint a room in the community center or redo new flooring or something and just wouldn't even begin to know. So I think it'd be great if we could come up with, I don't know whether it goes on our website or anywhere, just some concrete processes for people who want to volunteer with the city. Who do they contact? Where's the first port of contact? What is involved in that sort of thing? I'm not sure I even know.
Mr. Clark?
For the Crossroads
Thank you, Mr.
project,
Thompson.
is there a deadline for submitting?
I'm sorry, please?
Is there a deadline for the Crossroads projects to
I think the
submit?
deadline had passed, but she's
Okay.
certainly willing to accept them. She just wants to get it done. I mean, she wants to get more projects in Norwood, and so it's been extended.
Yeah, I think the official deadline now is either March 31st or April 1st. We should, if there's things that you think that we should do, it could be, there's so many things that just require labor, maybe a little bit of money, then we should get that going as soon as possible. So, yeah, like I said, if you think of something there, just send me an email and I'll get you all connected. But I know we would love to have, I think they had 10 or 15 groups last year, and they made a huge impact. I know they did litter stuff, they did stuff here. I'm hoping that, we'll at least get that many or more. So please, yeah, suggestions are great.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other new business? Just as an information, I attended the OKI meeting again this month, and there was a really interesting presentation on the census. It's coming up in 2020, and the Census Bureau is really looking to do more of the census online, which could be good for those of us who are tech savvy, but maybe not so good for some of our residents who might not have a computer. And so, I was thinking about maybe we need to contact the library about allowing the library, I know the library has computers, to maybe think about how we might accommodate folks with a census, because counting people really counts. That's how we get our representation in Congress. It's how we get funds from both the state, county and state and federal government. And so there is they're recommending that that each community have kind of a committee that we might want to start thinking about to partner with different organizations about who knows where the people are. The post office knows where all the people are, and just to make sure that everybody gets counted. Hamilton County did apply, and they are part of an organization that will confirm with the Census Bureau all of the addresses in Hamilton County. So not all 88 counties in Ohio did that. Hamilton County did do that, and so that kind of puts us ahead of the game a little bit. But just kind of want to bring your attention to the fact that the census is coming up, to think about how we might play a part in that, to make sure that everybody gets counted. We do have a year or so out, but it would be helpful to start planning on that to make sure that we count everybody that is indeed in the city. So I do have the information up here if anybody's interested. Hamilton County lost population in the states. It's interesting, they break it down by county and what percentage of some counties went up and most went down. And so I'm not sure if that's really a true indication or whether we just didn't do a very good job of counting last time. So just bring that to your attention. Ms. Stevenson?
Thank you. Just a point of clarity on two things you shared just now. OKI is recommending that there be a committee. Is that like an ad hoc committee that they're asking the municipalities to set up?
Just like a group that the Census Bureau is actually
the Census Bureau, sorry.
recommending it, that that you kind of have a committee. It's called a municipal complete count committee. They suggest like the mayor or a designee, heads of government, community organizations, faith-based people, universities, just different people to think of ways to make sure that everybody gets counted, the different ways. Some people they're going to start testing the system now, so you may get something in the mail, now a year or two before, to just kind of test the system, to test the questions that are being asked. They have to have the wording to Congress by March the 31st, and so soon after that, there will be some regional census centers that are opening. They did indicate that they will hire some temporary people, so that if folks have not answered the census for addresses that are on hand, there will be some temporary jobs to be had for people to actually knock on doors and to follow up to see if anybody indeed lives in that residence. And so it has to be completed. The total counts have to be to the president by December 31st of 2020. So they'll start opening field offices in 2019, and then early in 2020. Actually, the census will begin on April 1st, 2020. And so just, kind of planning. As I said, I have some information on just if communities want to make sure that more people get counted, to just get more involved in the census. This is just some suggestions as to who might be on that committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We can use every dollar that we can get, so important to count everybody here. So any other new business? We'll move on to communications. The first is a letter from the Ohio Liquor Control regarding a license transfer at 3825 Edwards Road. We had this on our agenda the last time, and most of the departments had not responded. We do have responses from the building, fire, and health department, and none of them had any objections. Ms. Stevenson? Did you have a question, or?
I did have a question. And I thought I recalled when this was first presented that police had already responded?
I think they did the last time.
Okay. That was
These are
for
new
the same
responses from
request.
building and property maintenance, the fire, and health departments. So if we have any objections, according to this, the objections must be postmarked by March the 15th. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. I think this is for that new co-working space that they put in
It's
there.
a transfer.
Right. But I'm just saying that the place that they're transferring it to is like, there's this new co-working group, I forgot what they're called, but
Field Collective.
thank you, at Rookwood. And so it's, I just saw a news article on it. It wasn't actually there, but it's a pretty cool little area, especially for people that, don't have an office that they work out on a day-to-day basis. So I think it provides some additional opportunities for Norwood residents that have businesses that want to really be in an environment where they're interacting with other people. And so anyways, long story short about that is that there's, it seems like it's going to be something that's going to be a good fit for the city, a good fit for Rookwood. So I'm kind of excited about that. And
It's an amazing place. If you haven't been there, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I have not, and I don't have any objections to the transfer.
Ms. Stevenson?
I don't have an objection either. I just wanted to share, there's lots of interest. I passed a member of the Field Collective last weekend, and they were eager to see this pass. And I did share with them, I didn't think we had objections. We were just waiting to hear back. So I'm excited that the members will be able to raise a toast and celebrate being in Norwood.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. So normally, if there's no objections, we usually just receive a file. Mr. Clark?
I was going to motion to receive and file.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Braden. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I just want to say that there are the process, the 30-day process and all that stuff, it's not a Norwood process. So these people were not waiting on Norwood City Council to make that happen. So they would have had to wait the 30 days either way. So they can't blame us for the delay in them
There
being
was
able to
no
show
blame.
us.
There's
Yes.
just eagerness.
Excellent.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Mayor Williams regarding appointment of the representatives to the Tax Incentive Review Council.
Dear Madam President and members of council, the Hamilton County Development Center is charged with the Hamilton County Tax Incentive Review Council, TURC, to monitor the compliance of active enterprise zone agreements and community reinvestment area agreements. Participating communities must formally designate 2 representatives to serve on the Hamilton County Council. TURC members must be approved by council, and they must be residents of the Norwood community. Please be advised that I am designating John Hannerhan and Andy Conlon as the city's representatives, and I am requesting that you approve these 2 individuals to represent our municipality. Thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Sincerely, Thomas F. Williams, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes, I move to receive and file, and do we need to confirm? And to confirm those appointments.
And to approve the appointments, yes.
Yep.
Seconded by Mr. Clark. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I'm excited, this tax, is it Tax Incentive Review Committee? Yeah, so the committee, I'm excited to have people like Andy and John on there. I think that, they're going to make sure taxpayers are treated fairly, for anything that's out there. So I think those are 2 good choices for Norwood residents.
Just note that there are representatives from Hamilton County that sit on the committee as well. I was a longtime member of that. So there are, I think, 3 people appointed from Hamilton County Commissioners, and then there are 2 from each community. So there's actually 5 people who will be reviewing those, but definitely each community has their own representatives. And usually the committee goes along with what the local people say. So if there's a problem with it, most of the county representatives will go along with those recommendations. And these 2 gentlemen certainly know the community, so. Motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter and to approve the appointments. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Mayor Williams regarding Mayor's Court fines for February.
Dear Madam President and members of council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of February 2018. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Thomas F. Williams, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Braden.
I vote the letter be received and filed.
Seconded by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Rachel Babick regarding Award of Excellence.
Dear Chief William Kramer, congratulations. Based off of the information that you provided to us concerning the many outstanding results and achievements accomplished by Officer Kyle Lackman, it is our privilege to announce that Officer Lackman has been selected among many nominees as recipients of this year's MADS Award of Excellence. The Award of Excellence will be presented in category to selected officers, judges, prosecutors, and prominent citizens in Norwood who have made a significant impact in their respective communities to stop impaired driving. Because the person who you nominated was selected as a recipient of this prestigious award, you are also cordially invited to attend the awards luncheon as our guest. The awards luncheon ceremony will be held at Doubletree Hilton, 6300 East Kemper Road, Sharonville, Ohio, on Thursday, March 29th from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Please RSVP no later than March 16th, 2018, to let us know if you will be attending by emailing the enclosed form to rachel.babbage@mad.org, or you may simply RSVP by calling the MAD office at 614-885-6233. I want to welcome and encourage you to invite any additional personal guests, spouses, department heads, co-workers, or community leaders who would like to come and share their sentiments to Officer Lackman by being a part of this prestigious event. We want to make this a big event, one that reflects the level of service and achievement that Officer Lackman has demonstrated in his service. There is a cost of $25 per person for all additional guests. That is necessary to help us cover the cost of additional meals. There is no cost to Officer Lackman and you, the person who nominated him. Again, please RSVP no later than March 16th. We hope to see you at the event. Sincerely, Rachel Babbage, Program Director of MAD, Ohio.
Mr. Braden.
I suggest the letter be received and filed.
Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sanker.
Yes, just a little congratulations to Officer Lackman as well for being recognized for his service, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sanker. Agreed. Any other comments? Yes, Mr.
I
Braden.
definitely want to share Mr. Sanker's thank you to Mr. to the officer. Appreciate that.
Perhaps we should send a letter from council congratulating Officer Lackman on the award and the work that he's done. Can you just add that? Just do that? Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. And if we could just maybe read that letter that we send at the next council meeting, I'd love to hear that.
We can do that. Any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We do have one absent member, Mr. Clark.
Move to excuse the absent member.
Seconded by Mr. Bonsall. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Mr. Braden.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.